Black Myth Wukong is out, and while the game does a good job showing you the ropes, that's not all you need to know. Hi folks, it's Falcon, and today on Game Ranks, 10 things Black Myth Wukong doesn't tell you. Starting off with number 10, jump attacks are overpowered. Jumping isn't something you're going to be doing very often in Wukong. There's just not a lot of places you can actually reach by jumping around, but the game does at least give you an extremely useful jump kick. Now, what makes it so good is how safe it is. When you jump in the air and tap the light attack button, your guy hones in on what you're targeting with the jump kick, and if it hits, you jump all the way back to where you started. That makes this move very powerful when you're in situations where you need to deal with large groups of enemies and don't have any focus. You just spam jump attacks from a distance, build up your focus, and then follow up a jump attack with a heavy attack, and you can clear out most enemies, even the tougher ones, without a huge amount of effort. It's not something you're desperately going to need to rely on in the early game. Most of Chapter 1 and 2 enemies are pretty easy to deal with. But as you progress through your adventure, the trash mobs start getting nastier. They appear in bigger groups, and to be frank, this kind of strategy can make some what are otherwise kind of unfair fights easy. Depends on, where you are, what your leveling is, etc., etc. How fair those fights feel, of course. It's not an unfair game by any means. But if you need it, it's there. It's not the most elegant way to win a fight, but if you're low on healing and you don't want to use any mana, this strategy is a very good backup for when the game decides to throw swarms of enemies at you. At number 9, here's some essential skills you should probably get first. There aren't a lot of skills you absolutely need in Wukong, but there are a few. With so many different abilities to unlock right from the start, picking the ones you actually need can be a little difficult, and many of the skill descriptions are a little confusing, so let's just cut through the bull and I'll tell you what you should invest your skills in first. The two places you really need to drop some sparks into first are Foundation and Staff Stances. Feel free to throw a few points into Magic also if you want, but those two things right there are where all the essential abilities really are. In Foundation, the first thing you're going to want to fill is the Stamina Tree. Deft Evasion's probably a requirement. It's just an improved dodge, so it becomes a lot easier to avoid damage, so get that right away. The next required skill is Composure, which makes it so that dodging no longer interrupts your attack combo. Doesn't sound that important on paper, but believe me, this is huge. And I will get into more about that later. I don't want to bog down this section exactly with that. All three skills that improve the perfect dodge are also must-haves. Bold Move, Ephemeral Shadow, and Vengeful Mirage. Perfect dodges are what you're going to be doing all the time, whether you're trying to or not. So having these skills makes it so that even when you're dodging, you're still doing damage and building up focus. The martial arts tree has some useful stuff too, but nothing I would consider absolutely necessary like stamina stuff. In Staff Stances, the most important thing you can get is to invest Spark so you can unlock more focus points. That's really the most important thing. Getting to 3 focus points is what you really want to do as soon as possible. You can get that by putting 10 points in this tree. Doesn't matter where. The skills that are best in this tree are just anything that make heavy attacks better. Fully charged heavy attacks are how you're going to be doing the most damage in this game, so anything that makes that stuff better is important, but the most important thing is to just get 3, then 4 focus points. The more you have, the easier boss fights are going to be. At number 8, don't forget to upgrade your gourd. The gourd is your lifeline in this game, but it is fairly weak. It's only got a few charges, and each charge only heals a paltry 33%. That might not feel too bad for the first few hours, but depending on your playstyle, it's going to hit you hard with a brick wall of difficulty starting in Chapter 2. So even the odds And don't forget to upgrade the gourd. The guy who will actually do it appears in Chapter 1. You might think he'll show up again somewhere else, but no. If you want to improve your healing, you gotta fast travel back to where he's hanging out. If you forget where he is, just travel to the Bamboo Grove, the Marsh of the White Mist, then look in the cave besides the wooden walkway.
Well, well. I'd stake you're one more monkey from Mount Huaguo. I've met many of you.
To increase your charges in the gourd, you need these items called fragrant vines, which are these golden-looking vines hanging off in special trees. They always look the same, so keep an eye out for these things. The stuff that's harder to immediately identify are the materials you'll upgrade, like what you use to upgrade your drink in the gourd. The starter one needs Awakened Wineworm and increases the amount you'll heal per charge. And these things are almost more important than the vines because seriously, the amount these things heal at first is totally pathetic, so you need to desperate the starter healing drink once or twice to actually make it effective. The wineworms are always found in these glowing barrels that you have to smash, and they can be pretty easy to overlook sometimes, so just keep that in mind when you're thinking about what to upgrade. Like, upgrade your gourd whenever it is possible, unless you have something else you really need, which I really can't imagine.
Now you can finally drink deep and full.
And number 7, Pillar Form can be extremely useful against certain bosses. The thing about Pillar Form is that it's not quite as powerful as it seems, but that does not mean it is useless. Against certain bosses, it's crazy powerful. The thing that makes it so effective isn't just that you can avoid certain attacks, it's also got some crazy reach. Certain boss abilities can be completely nullified if you switch to Pillar Form and just wait it out. Anything that's ground-based or causes a ton of little projectiles to swarm you, also on the ground, can be completely ignored with a fully charged pillar attack. It doesn't work for everything, though. If it's an aerial homing attack or anything that's actually going to hit your staff, you might fall flat on your ass and take damage anyway. So the pillar is a lot more situational than it might seem at first, but really, when it works, it works. I've found this ability the most effective against large, fast-moving bosses. Like the dragon in Chapter 3, breath attacks do nothing while you're up in the air, and the crazy long reach of the heavy attack means that you're pretty much guaranteed a hit, and when you do hit, it'll leave the boss stunned a while. Best thing about charged heavy attacks is their ability to interrupt and stun bosses. Once you get the hang of using them, you can basically stun lock any given boss into paste. Yeah, the game gets so much easier when you really start getting used to generating and then spending focus as quickly and as often as possible. And number 6, these special secret items called vessels are really helpful. One mechanic in the game that just basically goes entirely unexplained are these vessels. They're special tools with powerful effects that can counter the abilities of a chapter boss. These things are usually hidden and require some kind of special quest to find, so you'll need to carefully explore each major area to find them, but they are very worth getting. The one you find in Chapter 1 is a fireproof mantle, which when used makes you immune to fire damage for an extended amount of time. The big boss of Chapter 1 uses fire damage, so activating this item about halfway through the fight makes the entire encounter, like, just massively easier. To get it, all you need to do is ring the 3 bells in the mountain near certain boss fights. It's not hard to find them. At the time, I assumed they were just required for progression, but they're really not. It's totally optional. Ring all 3, and you'll be sent to a secret area with a special boss fight. Beat them, then examine the hanging corpse outside the 3rd bell to get the fireproof mantle. There's a similar item in Chapter 2 which can nullify the boss's tornado attacks, and more as the game goes on. Look for these things. They're really powerful buffs that are a little awkward to use. I mean, R2 plus clicking the left stick. Seriously? But use them when you find them. They're super powerful. At number 5, spells can be game changers. The thing about spells is that it's tempting to just use them for free damage, but if you're casting Immobilize just to beat on a boss for a second, or Cloud Step simply to immediately attack, you're wasting mana. I've found more success using spells defensively rather than offensively. Save Immobilize for the times when you really need a breather to heal, or when you want to use a spirit attack. I wouldn't recommend relying on Immobilize though. Yeah, it is handy in a punch, but it's expensive mana-wise, and it takes a long time to recharge. On the other hand, Cloud Step is cheap, it recharges really fast, and best of all, it generates a clone that distracts enemies. That's what makes Cloud Step the best. It draws in homing attacks, it causes swarms of enemies to focus on it instead of you, and it can keep a boss busy while you're taking a second to heal. If there's one MVP spell in this game, it's Cloud Step. Upgrade that decoy as soon as possible and use the spell as often as possible to avoid attacks and get free hits in, because it's crazy how versatile and effective this thing is for how little the cost. And number 4 is you can always respec free of charge. It's a small thing, but it's really good to know. At any point, you can redistribute your sparks at any shrine, and it's totally free. You don't even have to reset all your skills to do it. You can undo the ones you want, keep the rest. So there's really no reason not to respec when you feel like it, whether it's for experimentation or you are thinking about a specific way to go at a specific boss or something. Like, change things around as often as you want, because there's really no penalty for it. You can even reset the relic upgrades. Nothing's set in stone in Wukong. Use that to your advantage. And number 3, don't mash. It might sound dumb, but this is a simple tip that fundamentally changed how I was playing the game. At first, I was legitimately frustrated. The combat felt kind of imprecise. I wasn't dodging when I felt like I should have, and it was because I was mashing the attack button instead of carefully tapping it out. The way combos work, you're going to want to mash to get them out, but don't fall into that trap. Instead, take a second to learn how long each attack actually is, because you will be surprised just how long some of these attacks actually are and how easily it can be dodged out of. Keeping your combo going while dodging is one of the most important skills in this game. Once you figure out how to do it, then the game is going to get a lot easier. Triggering finishers from light combos is really good. For a lot of bosses, it's the same as getting a heavy attack. It leaves them stunned, which is usually the perfect time to follow up with a fully charged heavy attack. So, understanding what each part of the regular combo does look like is so important, and keeping the combo going with carefully timed dodges will make the bosses that originally gave you a hard time into total chumps. Moving on to number 2, there are side quests, and they are worth doing. You know how in some Dark Souls games where the NPCs, they're around, they'll talk to you, they'll say some mysterious stuff, and they'll appear somewhere else, and pretty much the only way to resolve their stories in a satisfying way is to follow a guide. Wukong works basically the same way, but less confusing. There are NPCs around who are sometimes clearly, sometimes not so clearly asking for your help, but if you bring them an item and meet them somewhere else, you'll progress their story. In this game's case, it's very worth it to try to resolve these stories because the rewards are excellent. And I don't just mean some new piece of armor or something, I mean entire new areas and bosses. Take this boar guy in Chapter 2. You can find him out in the desert complaining about a hangover. To cure him, you get the Sobering Stone in the Windrest village.
How refreshing. You woke me up. Thanks. Enough with the chit-chat. My belly's growling.
He'll then move to the Crouching Tiger Temple where he wants a Jade Lotus. Get him that.
I've been craving a taste of that juicy Jade Lotus. Can you find me some in this barren land?
Then meet him back where you first found him near the big door. It'll trigger a boss fight. Beat him up and whisk you away to a new area with multiple new boss fights. It's a lot more than you normally expect for stuff like this, and he's not the only one like this, so when an NPC wants something, try to help him out.
Men in our time do not see the ancient moon, but this moon hath shone on men of yore. Behold! Be it the realm of sunset or the realm of gold, it's but an echo of the past. Legends speak of an ancient, colossal beetle in these sands.
And finally, how to deal with the jailers in the Pagoda Realm. In Chapter 3, you eventually enter this crazy place called the Pagoda Realm. It's a cyclopean jail patrolled by these bizarre enemies called Lantern Warriors. These guys have the annoying habit of draining your health when they're nearby. You might be tempted to try to avoid them or sneak around them or something, but there's not really anything you can actually do. Your only real option is to try to kill them as quickly as possible. They tend to appear in twos, but what you need to do is kill just one of them and they both disappear. Then you're free to go back and restore your health at a checkpoint, and they won't appear again, at least until you reset the game. As intimidating as these guys look, they're not actually that aggressive, so don't be afraid to just go balls out on these guys. This whole section isn't as frustrating or as difficult as it may seem at first. Just kill these guys, get your health back at the shrine, and then move on. I hope that's going to make the game a little easier, and not in a cheesy way, but like in a way where you learn some things about the game and apply them.